YouTube. This is Maggie Negan, the Walking Pen Girl 27. How are you guys? So, chapter 1 was a big success. I just say thank you so much for the 8 likes and everything. And I want to say, here comes chapter 2, you guys. Hope you enjoy it. And if you guys want any more, please comment down below. And here we go, you guys. Enjoy very much.
My grandmother. I myself had 2 separate encounters with witches before I was 8 years old. From the first, I escaped unharmed, but on the second occasion, I was not so lucky. Things happened to me that will probably make you scream when you read about them. That can't be helped. The truth must be told. The fact that I'm still here and able to speak to you, however peculiar I may look, is due entirely to my wonderful grandmother. My grandmother was Norwegian. The Norwegians know all about witches, for Norway, with its black forest and icy mountains, is where the first witches came from. My father and my mother were also Norwegian, but because my father had a business in England, I had been born there and had lived there, and had started going to an English school. Twice a year at Christmas and in the summer, we went back to Norway to visit my grandmother. This old lady, as far as I could gather, was just about the only surviving relative we had on either side of our family. She was my mother's mother, and I absolutely adored her. When she and I were together, we spoke in either Norwegian or in English. It didn't matter which. We were equally fluent in both languages, and I have to admit that I felt closer to her than to my mother. Soon after my 7th birthday, my parents took me as usual to spend Christmas with my grandmother in Norway, and it was over there while my father and my mother and I were driving in icy weather just north of Oslo that our car skidded off the road and went tumbling down into a rocky ravine. My parents were killed. I was firmly strapped into the back seat and received only a cut on the forehead. I won't go into the horrors of the terrible afternoon. I still get the shivers when I think about it. I finished up, of course, back in my grandmother's house with her arms around me tight and both of us crying the whole night long. "What are we going to do now?" I asked her through the tears. "You'll stay here with me," she said. "I will look after you." "Aren't I going back to England?" "No," she said. "I could never do that. Heaven shall take my soul, but Norway shall keep my bones." The very next day, in order that we might both try to forget our great sadness, my grandmother started telling me stories. She was a wonderful storyteller, and I was enthralled by everything she told me, but I didn't become really excited until she got onto the subject of witches. She was apparently a great expert on these creatures, and she made it very clear to me that her witch stories, unlike most of the others, were not imaginary tales. They were all true. They were the gospel truth. They were history. Everything she was telling me about witches had actually happened, and I had been better believe it. What was worse, what was far, far worse, was that witches were still with us. They were all around us, and I had better believe that too. "Are you really being truthful, Grandmama? Really and truly truthful?" "My darling," she said, "you won't last long in this world if you don't know how to spy a witch when you see one." "But you told me that witches look like ordinary women, Grandmama, so how can I spot them?" "You must listen to me," my grandmother said. "You must remember everything I tell you. After that, all you can do is cross your heart and pray to heaven and hope for the best." We were in the big living room of our house in Oslo, and I was ready for bed. The curtains were never drawn in that house, and through the windows I could see huge snowflakes falling slowly onto an outside world that was as black as tar. My grandmother was tremendously old and wrinkled, with a massive white body which was smothered in gray lace. She sat there majestic in her armchair, filling every inch of it. Not even a mouse could have squeezed in to sit beside her. I myself, just 7 years old, was crouched onto the floor, and her feet wearing pajamas, dressing gown, and slippers. "You swear you aren't pulling my leg?" I kept saying to her. "You swear you aren't just pretending?" "Listen," she said. "I have no less than 5 children have simply vanished off the face of this earth, never to be seen again. The witches took them." "I still think you're trying to frighten me," I said. I am trying to make sure you don't go the same way, she said. I love you, and I want you to stay with me. Tell me about the children who disappeared, I said. My grandmother was the only grandmother I ever met who smoked cigars. She lit one now, a long black cigar that smelled of burning rubber. The first child I knew who disappeared, she said, was called Ragnhild Hansen. Ragnhild was about 8 at the time, and she was playing with her little sister on the lawn. Their mother, who was baking bread in the kitchen, came outside for a breath of air. Where's Ragnhild? She asked. She went away with the tall lady, the little sister said. What tall lady? The mother said. The tall lady in white gloves, the little sister said. She took Ragnhild by the hand and led her away. No one, my grandma said, ever saw Ragnhild again. Didn't they search for her? I asked. They searched for miles around. Everyone in the town helped, but they never found her. What happened to the other 4 children? I asked. They vanished, just as Ragnhild did. How, Grandmama? How did they vanish? In every case, a strange lady was seen outside the house just before it happened. But how did they vanish? I asked. The second one was very peculiar, my grandmother said. There was a family called Christensen. They lived up on Holmenkollen, and they had an oil painting in the living room, which they were very proud of. The painting showed some ducks in the yard outside our farmhouse. There were no people in the painting, just a flock of ducks on a grassy farmyard, and the farmhouse in the background. It was a large painting and rather pretty. Well, one day their daughter, Solveig, came home from school eating an apple. She said a nice lady had given it to her many times, my grandmother said, and the peculiar thing was that little Solveig kept changing her position in the picture. One day she would actually be inside the farmhouse, and you could see her face looking out of the window. Another day she would be far over to the left with a duck in her arms. Did you see her moving in the picture, Grandmama? Nobody did. Wherever she was, whether outside feeding the ducks or inside looking out of the window, she was always motionless, just a figure painted in oils. It was all very odd, my grandmother said. Very odd indeed. And what was most odd of all, that she was... Guess who's now wearing Outlast? For a lip color that stays on beautiful for 10 hours. Outlast is unsurpassed. The two-step system means color stays on your lips and off your glass. Even after pizza imitators, you've been outlasted. Outlast is all-day lip color from easy, breezy, beautiful CoverGirl. Tell me you love me. Tell me you love me. Tell me you love me. Tell me you want me. Tell me you miss me. Miss me. Excite me. Excite me. Dazzle me. Dazzle me. Delight me. Delight me. There's no gift like a Christmas gift from Victoria's Secret. Tell me that there's no other woman in the world like me. Like me? Like me.